Gospel of Luke. Now when Jesus returned, the crowd welcomed him, for they were all waiting for him. Just then there came a man named Jairus, a leader of the synagogue. He fell at Jesus' feet and begged him to come to his house, for he had an only daughter, about 12 years old, who was dying. As he went, the crowds pressed in on him. Now there was a woman who had been suffering from hemorrhages for 12 years. And though she had spent all she had on physicians, no one could cure her. She came up behind him and touched the fringe of his clothes, and immediately her hemorrhage stopped. Then Jesus asked, "Who touched me?" When all denied it, Peter said, "Master, the crowds surround you and press in on you." But Jesus said, "Someone touched me, for I noticed that power had gone out from me." When the woman saw that she could not remain hidden, she came trembling. And falling down before him, she declared in the presence of all the people why she had touched him and how she had been immediately healed. He said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace." While he was still speaking, someone came from the leader's house to say, "Your daughter is dead. Do not trouble the teacher any longer." When Jesus heard this, he replied, "Do not fear, only believe, and she will be saved." When he came to the house, he did not allow anyone to enter with him, except Peter, John, and James, and the child's father and mother. They were all weeping and wailing for her. But he said, "Do not weep, for she is not dead, but sleeping." And they laughed at him, knowing that she was dead. But he took her by the hand and called out, "Child, get up." Her spirit returned, and she got up at once. Then he directed them to give her something to eat. Her parents were astounded, but he ordered them to tell no one what had happened. This is the word of the Lord.
Shall we pray? Oh God, how grateful we are that you who have spoken still speak. May it be so even now as we give ears. May we know that we are seen and known by you, and called to see and to know others. For we pray it in Jesus' name. I have to say that I'm deeply moved by the founding of the School of Psychology at Fuller Theological Seminary. It is a remarkable thing that 50 years ago, Evangelical Seminary established a School of Psychology. That was not intuitive. And I'm an extreme N on the Myers-Briggs, and I just know that was just not intuitive. It was an amazingly bold and honest thing to do. And one of the reasons why it belongs so deeply in Fuller is because it is an institution and a school that makes, in its founding emphasis and in its character and in its quality, one of the most gospel-like affirmations that we hear in this text and in so many other texts, which is that we are truly seen and known by the God of the universe, who has spoken in Jesus Christ and sees and knows every one of us and everyone that has ever been. Certainly everyone that has been touched by the School of Psychology and whose lives have been changed. And tonight, as we just take a moment to reflect on this sublime text, I pray that God will give us ears to hear again afresh the astonishment of what it is that we find in this text. There are seasons of ministry that are overwhelming, and Jesus, by this stage in the Gospel of Luke, has already known such seasons. In fact, just before this, we hear about him calming a storm. That would be a season really all of its own. And then that's followed by this extraordinary experience where he casts out the demons of the Gerasene demoniac. This is not everyday experience in my life as a pastor or as a Christian. It was a dramatic moment in Jesus' life, and if all of that was not enough, then it seems in that same continuous season comes this moment. The moment where Jesus is welcomed back after whatever it is that he's been doing. People there might have not known the details, but now having returned, he comes back to them, and having come back to them, they welcome him. And the throng gathers around him and presses in on him, and then right in the midst of that comes a very bold move. A leader of the synagogue, nonetheless, comes and actually bows before Jesus, not only kneels down, but begs him to come with him, because there's something so desperate that he wants Jesus to do. In this case, it was to heal his 12-year-old daughter. The vulnerability of his action, the vulnerability and the anxiety of that moment of seeking the welfare, the restoration and healing of his daughter, it was an overwhelming experience for him, offered in the middle of a throng that was simply wanting to have a welcome home moment. And now, before they hardly caught their breath, Jesus is being asked to go on to yet the next ministry. And the pressure of the crowd, we all probably notice, surrounding him, and they're moving in that direction until suddenly, from behind, the text says, Jesus' cloak is touched by a woman who had been hemorrhaging for 12 years. It's an interesting parallel between the 12-year-old girl and the 12-year-old Flo. This amazing sense that the length of this girl's life had been the length of this woman's suffering. An extraordinary parallel, symmetry between the two. A way of measuring just how significant this pain had been. If leprosy was a problem of the first century, it's almost unimaginable to begin to enter into the life of this woman with this condition that lingered and lingered and plagued every day of life. And in the context of all of that, she simply touches the hem of his garment, and the text seems to imply she just fades back in the crowd until Jesus stops all the action. This is one of his most remarkable traits. In the midst of the sea of it all, he can somehow still focus on the singularity of individuals. And Jesus now slows down all the action and simply asks, who was it that touched me? His disciples, in their characteristic effort to just move Jesus on with the cause, said, no, I mean, clearly this is not the moment to stop. The action is moving now to Jairus' house, because it's Jairus' daughter, remember, Jesus, who's actually the one that's got the real crisis. It's not somebody who touched the hem of your garment. Why could that matter? What could possibly have happened behind the back of your garment? And yet Jesus, feeling all the pressure of the crowd, feeling the rush toward Jairus' daughter, only too eager to go and help, nevertheless slows it all down. And in that way that must have been so awkward, just asks everyone, so who was it? This was not a moment to be rushed. This was something that trumped even the drama of the pressure to move on to the healing that would eventually come. No, this was actually a moment to stop everything and to focus on the one who had touched his heart. It's unimaginable to try to enter into the mind and heart of that woman again. 12 years with this extraordinary condition. Now experiencing immediate healing, grateful, but this is not a person who sought crowd attention. This is not a person who would have ever done anything to try to gather people to stop and look at her, to see her, to hear her, to respond to her. This was not at all part of her history, and yet the drama of that moment and the healing that had come somehow brought forth, it seems, both honesty and amazing courage. That she was willing to actually step through the crowd and to engage, to say, it's me. This is what happened. This is what I've experienced. This is what's unfolding. This is what I've come to feel and to be anew. It is an amazing. You can imagine again all the sense of ritual violation, all the sense of male domination that would have so easily wanted to push the crowd away from women and certainly away from this troubled, bleeding woman. But not Jesus. He stops. He sees her. He hears her witness. And then he calls her daughter. Your faith has made you well. What is it that the School of Psychology is about? It's about many, many, many things. But at the core, the instinct that I think drives the School of Psychology is the desperate need, human need, to be seen and to be healed. And it happens in this case, not privately, but very publicly, even communally, we could say. It happens right there in front of God and everybody. They're just all there, and it's just happening. This is not a therapy room. This is not a place where they get to have 15 minutes of silence and avoidance of the crowd. You don't even get a special entrance. No, you just get the big public entrance. And right there, Jesus delivers a ministry, which is the ministry that transforms and heals your life. And it's a ministry that is the background, the fruition, the blessing that the School of Psychology wants to offer, wants to nurture, wants to sustain and study and understand and explore and consider, because in fact the whole human race needs to be seen and to be healed. I think of how many times in my life I have been touched by this kind of encounter. Not as dramatically, sometimes as publicly, but as truly as this. When I was a student at Fuller, there was a period of time for me which was one of the darkest times of my life. It was absolutely staggering darkness. And there was someone who saw me and knew me and loved me and even helped to heal me. And I think of people along the way in my life who have been people who have provided this kind of ministry, who have stopped everything else to see me. I think about the gift that it is to be a pastor, when the goal of almost every day is not the machinery of the church, it's really the ministry of seeing people and of seeking to be an agent of a God whose love is tangible and real and personal as this. There's a ministry of the gospel that encompasses systems, that encompasses structures, that encompasses institutions, patterns of life, but there's also a ministry of the gospel that touches the one. Here in this story, that is the core of it, and my life has been touched by that. Your life has probably been touched by that. It is a transformative encounter. A person I know who is a pediatric research doc in San Francisco had an amazing experience which was for him transformative in this way, and I think is worth our consideration briefly tonight. He writes this. His name is Tom Boyd. He teaches at UCSF. A little more than a year ago, during my month serving as the attending physician on the pediatrics ward of the University of California, San Francisco, I ran across a dying boy who, together with his mother, reminded me, as I am often reminded of the troubled, myopic vision so characteristic of the medicine that I've learned and that I practice. He was a relatively young boy. I will call him Blake. And he describes him as a boy who had a condition called mucolipidosis, which is a kind of carbohydrate hoarding disease, which then causes every organ, internal and external, ultimately to bloat. And at one stage in his reflections, he refers to him in some as a small, young tomato of a boy. with small appendages that stuck out from his body, of which were of little functioning good, teeth that were engorged, and a process of dying that would take his life in the next year. Blake was not overly grateful for the abundant cutting-edge medicine at UCSF. I think he somehow sensed that he was nearing the end of his time, and he decided that all of the care that we were offering was simply not in his best interest. He didn't want it, and he gave it no time. Blake's intolerance for the hospital and its staff, together with his unsavory countenance, frankly, made him a difficult patient to care for. His medical care was difficult by virtue of his resistance to our routines, but Tom says, my own ability to humanly care for Blake was also compromised by the physical side effect and by his stolid indifference or antagonism to the very best of my efforts on his behalf. One July evening, held in the hospital late by a series of unanticipated events, I approached Blake's room at an unaccustomed hour. His young, single mom, who was at her own place of work for the daylight hours of most days, was sitting by the edge of the bed, deeply immersed in a conversation with Blake. I paused and then settled at the door, transfixed by the scene that was before me in the darkened hospital room. Blake's mom was talking to him. In hushed and comforting tones, she spoke about her day, wondering how things had gone for him, asking him about his new nurse, reviewing for him the events of her own day at work. As she spoke, leaning over her son, her hand stroked his forehead and hair in a mundane gesture that filled him with her love for her boy. Blake's eyes, now moist and utterly devoid of his stern resistance, looked up into his mother's face, absorbing every moment, every piece of her presence there with him. Relaxed and more peaceful than I'd ever seen him. Blake seemed to melt into his mother's eyes. She stroked his round, swollen face and said to him, "Oh, my beautiful, beautiful little boy." Suddenly I understood what I had not understood. When this mother gazed at her bloated, dying son, she physically saw a person I had never seen. Transformed by her eyes' willingness to see the child beyond the disease, Blake had become a different being, an individual no longer diseased and distorted as she saw him, but a frightened child, visibly changed by his mother's love. In the months since that night and since his death later in that same year, I've often thought of Blake and his mother. I've thought of how limited my vision of my patients has been, and of the peculiar and short-sighted lenses through which so much of our vaunted medicine is conducted. I've thought of how mysteriously my own way of seeing Blake was irreparably changed by the experience of watching his mom truly see him and respond to him for who he finally was. In that moment, now many years ago, I came to realize that I, too, had been seen, that I had been looked upon by the eyes of Jesus, who out of his love saw me in palpable, unmistakable, and overpowering ways. The wonder of Jesus' way of seeing people such as me and Blake and countless others is that it is a transforming vision. It is an instrumental vision that reaches into the essential character of the person and alters that character at its core. It is miraculously a way of seeing that is accessible to all of us, and one that transforms not only the person seen, but also the person seeing. In this text, in Luke's Gospel, Jesus sees the woman. He goes on also to see Jairus' daughter, to see and hear the laughing crowd in derision at the thought that he should come healed. There are so many that see and fail to see in this story. So much evidence of vision that's distorted, and vision that's longing and full of desire, but no sense of confidence. But out of nowhere comes someone who is unseen, who touches the hem of Jesus' garment, and in that moment Jesus stops in order to see the one whom he had already healed. What is the mission to which the Church of Jesus Christ in the world is called to? It is not a ministry of seeing and healing. And why does the School of Psychology matter so much in a theological seminary? Because the thing that it is called to help nurture in the lives of all of those that are specifically trained through its programs, but through the overflow, the affluence of what also touches the whole rest of the seminary, is an opportunity to learn to see and to be seen, and to realize that at the core of the ministry of the gospel in the world, while there are words, precious, truthful words to be spoken, there is also seeing and healing to be done. The School of Psychology is a vital part of that struggle. I remember years ago being in a context where I was in a terrible bicycle accident. I'd love to tell you that it happened in the final part of the Tour de France when I was just coming into the Champs-Elysees and about to win, but it actually happened on a flat bike path in Alameda, and there was nothing happening, absolutely nothing going on around me at all. There was no danger, no water, no traffic, no cars, no hills, nothing, absolutely nothing going on around me, but I managed to somehow collide with another bike, and that bike had a straight set of handlebars, and that bike went down. I went up on my front tire, and my bike went backwards. My face was driven into the end of the bike, and my left eye was pushed back, and I spilled about an inch, and down and I spilled an inch. It was a very, very dramatic period for me. I had a few double vision images separated about like that. I thought of it as my sort of Picasso period. It was really a terrible period, but it was also a period of thinking a lot about sight. And I remember once